How are you?
Good, and you?
Very well, thank you. Welcome everyone who's joining our webinar. Welcome to Sable International and our webinar today. We're going to be talking about general skill migration to Australia. Bit of background about us, Sable International. We're a group of companies. We're a group of different businesses. We do a lot of different things. I think at last count, there's 16 different individual business units in the group, and we do all sorts of things across the globe: accounting and tax and wealth management and migration by investment and British nationality and UK citizenship and all sorts of things. Here today, Jamie and I are going to concentrate on talk to you about general skill migration. My name's Sam Hopwood. I am the Managing Director of Sable International here in Australia. I'm sitting in our Melbourne office right now. For those of you who are listening to this recorded in the future, it is 8 p.m. in Melbourne on the 30th of October 2025. Jamie, where are you?
Yeah, I'm based in Cape Town. It is 11 a.m., so very, very different. Nice, bright, sunny day in Cape Town. And yes, I'm Jamie. I'm based in our Cape Town team. I manage our back office here in Cape Town, our team that supports our migration agents based in Australia.
Yeah, that's an important concept for us to discuss as well, so that our clients and people listening understand. Yeah, I'm based in Melbourne and I run a team of migration agents here in our Melbourne office, and Jamie runs a team of migration administrators and caseworkers in our Cape Town office. That's our back office support effectively. And in tandem, the two offices manage our clients and our applications for our clients across the world. So if you do engage with us, you'll probably deal with both my team here in Melbourne and Jamie's team in Cape Town.
Absolutely. Works quite nicely. Nice round-the-clock care.
Definitely. I'll just let everyone know that there is a chat box functionality in the webinar tonight, and you're welcome to ask questions through the chat box. If we can get people in the chat box now telling us where they are in the world, just type in the city that you're currently in, so that we get a understanding of where everyone is tuning in from around the globe. We've got people in Cape Town.
Cape
We've got
Town.
people in Joburg, more Cape Townians. There's people in London. Oh, we've got people in Portugal. Come on, everyone, tell us where you
Amazing.
are. Spain, Sydney. Okay.
Durban.
So the chat box is there. The functionality is there. You're welcome to ask questions. If something's not clear, you're welcome to post a question in the chat box. We may or may not be able to answer it in full depending on what the question is, but we will endeavour to, and we'll also, if required, have a Q&A at the end of the session. So, Jamie, what are we talking about today?
Quite a few different things. Got a lot to get through, but
Okay, so today's
we'll move
agenda.
through it.
So GSM, General Skill Migration, is what GSM stands for. GSM and General Skill Migration encompass the visa subclasses 189, 190 and 491, and we're going to be talking about those in some detail today. We're going to talk about key eligibility requirements, what you must be able to demonstrate in order to have any chance. We're going to talk about the points tested system and what's going to enhance your profile in the GSM system by being able to score more points. We're going to talk about the step-by-step application process and how it is that you enter into this process to obtain a visa. We'll talk about latest updates, visa quotas, state nominations, industry trends. We'll talk about the invitation rounds, what not to do, and what to do if you're not invited. And like I say, then we'll probably do some Q&A at the end if we've got time and if people have any questions. So, Jamie. Okay, so GSM visas, subclasses 189, 190, and 491. So, what you first of all need to understand that all Australian visas have a numerical value attached to them. So, we're talking subclasses, the 189, the 190 and the 491 are different subclasses of visas. They also have names to them. So the 189 is called a skilled independent visa. I call it the gold standard or the creme de la creme. It's the best one that you can get, and everyone wants it. And whenever I take a phone call from someone who is making a general inquiry, they all say, I want to get the 189 visa because everyone's told me it's the
Absolutely.
best. And unfortunately, because it's the best, it's also the most difficult to get. So I have to quickly, unfortunately, quell people's enthusiasm for the 189 and talk to them about the 190, which we'll get to. But let's talk about the 189. So it is a skilled independent visa, and it's called the independent visa because you don't need to be nominated by a state employer. You are independent of everyone and anything, and you're a permanent resident of Australia. You can live anywhere you want, you can work anywhere you like. You've got freedom to do as you choose. So it's entirely up to you. Department of Home Affairs needs to select you and invite you to apply. Once granted the visa, like I say, there's no restrictions. You can live and work anywhere you like. So the 189 is what everyone's shooting for. At the moment, the 189 is pretty much reserved for healthcare workers and construction workers. And unfortunately, if you don't fall into one of those two industries, then achieving the 189 is perhaps unrealistic. Also, the 189 has been reduced in the amount of quota that has been made available for that particular visa subclass in this year compared to historical years. So it's harder to get. There's more competition and there's fewer of them. Supply and demand is the issue. But don't worry, we've got other options. Skilled nominated visas, subclass 190, it's still a permanent visa. So this is what I tell people. I say, don't be despondent. No, you might not qualify for 189, but hey, the 190 is still a permanent visa. You're still a permanent resident. You're exactly the same under 190 as compared to 189. So, it's not a lesser valued visa in my mind. It does require that you obtain a nomination from the state government. And once granted the visa, you have an obligation. It's a moral obligation to live and work in the nominating state for at least 2 years. It's not a legal obligation. It's not tied to your visa conditions, but you have entered into an agreement with the state government to say that you're going to come and live and work in that state for a period of time. Now, let me explain. Excuse me. Let me explain why the state governments might nominate you in the first place, and how the state nominated system works. Essentially, the federal government hands out a quota of nominations to each of the states and territories in Australia. All the states and territories then survey their own local labour market needs. They then determine different skilled occupations lists, which are higher in demand in particular areas of their state. They build those lists and then they build certain additional requirements in order to be nominated for that particular occupation. And so what New South Wales needs and wants and requires from a migrant may look different from what Queensland needs and wants and what's going to be on their list. Once the state agrees to nominate you, you will immediately be invited to apply for the visa itself. So achieving nomination from the state is ultimately your invitation to being invited to apply for the visa. The skilled provisional visa, subclass 491, is, as it says on the label, a regional visa. It requires you to go and live and work in a regional area. It's also a provisional visa, so it's not a permanent residency visa, unlike the 189 and the 190. The provisional name of the visa means that it has a direct pathway to permanent residency. So you will obtain permanent residency in the future via the 491 if you do certain things as required. You've got to live and work in the regional area for at least 3 years. in order to be granted a permanent visa in the future. So it's still not a bad option. It's like, okay, there's lots of beautiful regional areas in Australia. I grew up in a regional area. I might be living in Melbourne at the moment, but I grew up in Orange, New South Wales, 300 kilometres west of Sydney, 40,000 people, beautiful country town. Um, Lovely wine and food region. I would encourage anyone to go and live and work in a regional area of Australia. You'd be surprised how much beauty and opportunities there are in the regions. So it's not the great sandy desert. When you talk about people,
I was
when you
going to
talk
say,
about the region,
everybody thinks
yeah,
that.
yeah, they do, don't
Tumbleweed.
they, Jamie? Exactly.
Yeah.
When you talk to people from overseas about Australia and the regional areas, they go, I don't want to live in the desert though, Sam. I'm like, it's not the desert, I promise you. It doesn't look anything like the desert. Um, yeah, the only sand that you'll find in Orange is in the bunkers at the golf course. You won't find any other sand anywhere in Orange. It's a very green and leafy area. So regional areas, don't write them off. They're a great opportunity. The 491 is a great visa. If you can get hold of it, then yeah, it's a great option. So those are the three visa subclasses that fit within the General School Migration Program that we would encourage you to consider. What's next, Jamie?
What is next? So, next up, just some key eligibility requirements. So, just the critical
Okay,
components.
so these are the non-negotiables. You've got to be under the age of 45 at the time of invitation. Um, so when you are invited to apply, you will receive an email that says, "Here's your invitation. You're invited to apply." You must be under the age of 45 at that point in time. Now you then go and submit your visa application, and you're over the age of 45. By the time they process your application, you're 46. It doesn't matter as long as you are under 45 at the time of invitation. Excuse me, I do have a little bit of a cold at the moment. So your occupation needs to be on the skilled occupations list, and there's a number of different occupations on different types of lists. And the medium to long term list is like the top list. The short term list is like the middle list. And then the regional list is, I'm not going to call it the bottom list, but it is the list that we put at the bottom when we rank lists. So find your occupation on a particular list. Um, Unless if you don't work in an occupation which is on one of these lists, then I'm sorry, then you haven't met one of the key eligibility requirements and you're not going to qualify for general school migration. Now you found yourself on a particular list, you found your occupation on that list, that's great. The next thing you need to do is you need to obtain a positive skills assessment in that occupation. The skill assessing authorities are independent authorities. They're not necessarily the Australian government. They are independent authorities who are set up to assess your qualifications, your skills, your experience, as compared to an Australian standard. Jamie, could you take over?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and also just on noting this, with the skill assessments, it is very, very different. A lot of people tend to ask, do I have to sit and write a test? Maybe it depends on the occupation. Do I have to present myself physically in person to sort of, prove I can do the job? It depends on the occupation. So, we definitely do assist with that, and we'll take you through what your occupation needs, skills assessment wise. Um, in addition to the skill assessment, you also need to demonstrate that you have competent English. And that is the bare minimum English level requirement. So if you don't meet competent, unfortunately, again, you've not met one of the key eligibility requirements. You can't proceed further. You have to at least meet competent. And that's demonstrated by either holding an eligible passport from a particular country or sitting in obviously an approved English language test and getting a particular level of score that meets competent.
Yeah.
Very, very
So thank
important.
you. I just dived into a lozenge because my throat was dying there. So thank you, Jamie.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
So competent English. So if you've got a passport from the UK, from Ireland, from America, from Canada, from New Zealand,
New Zealand.
then you automatically are considered to have competent English. You don't score additional points from having competent English, but you meet the minimum eligibility requirements for GSM. And then overall, you've got to score at least 65 points. So let's talk about the points, Jamie.
Yep. So the points are made up of obviously a few different factors. We have might as well dive into that here. So you can see here there's quite a long list in age, qualifications, English competency, and so on. You score points against all of these various factors, or you can score points, and you need to total up to a minimum of at least 65. The department do have a free online points calculator that you can use. You're absolutely welcome to, but I would just caution you to be careful. That is not necessarily an accurate reflection of the points. If you don't understand the legislation behind how the points are calculated, you could potentially overclaim for your points. So you need to make sure that you're only claiming what you are eligible to claim for. So work experience can be quite particular. Meeting, the study requirement in Australia. If you have previously studied in Australia, it's quite specific on what you need to have studied at what level for how long. So yeah, it can get quite complicated, and so I would just caution to not just trust the online points calculator and get very excited when you see 100 points, because that's not necessarily accurate.
It's a good point you make, Jamie. So there's 12 different components within the points test that you could potentially claim points in the system. But like Jamie says, um, you can't necessarily claim points everywhere just because you are of the opinion that you have, for example, completed a professional year in Australia, or that you meet the Australian study requirement. It's important that you understand the background behind what the Australian study requirement is, for example.
Absolutely. Okay. We've also just included a step-by-step of how the application process works. Sam, would you like to dive in, or?
Yeah, step by step. Look, this is um, it's not strictly speaking the Department of Home Affairs step by step, but this is how we suggest you do it. So you don't have to do the English language test before you do the skills assessment. That's what we suggest you do. But you could do it the other way around. But you need to have done a skills assessment before you do an expression of interest. Um, and then,
Yeah,
yes, you will
absolutely.
do a state nomination, an invitation to apply, submit a visa, and hopefully you get granted a visa. Let me tell you a story. Recently, I had a conversation with a friend of a friend who was talking about a guy who is here in Australia on a working holiday who is a plumber. He submitted an expression of interest himself without consulting with anyone, and said that he was a plumber, said that he had a skills assessment. He just thought he was, well, he comes from the UK and his skills have been assessed in the UK when he did his apprenticeship. So he believed that he has a skills assessment. And he was invited to apply for 189, like the best of the best. And then he consulted with a migration agent, not us, but someone else. And they told him, sorry, mate, you don't have a skills assessment. You can't apply for the 189. He said, well, I'll go and do one now. Like, let's go and do one now. And no, I'm sorry, you didn't have one at the time of invitation. Therefore, you can't apply for one now. If you do go and get yourself a skills assessment now and apply based on that invitation, you will be refused. So it's an example of where people have a misconception or a misunderstanding of the system and the requirements. They complete their own expression of interest, get an invitation, and then find out that their invitation's going to result in a refusal because they didn't have the foundation of the information knowledge they needed before they started the
Yeah,
process.
it happens quite often. I get quite a few calls. Absolutely. I mean, I had somebody actually go on to even take it a step further, Sam, and submit the visa application
Mm,
when she got her invitation, and she'd put, unfortunately, all sorts of claims, English test, skills assessment, and at certain levels. And she obviously was awarded points for all those factors. And the department, as part of the visa application, wanted to see the documentation to back that up. And of course, she had none of it. So when the department issued the request, she realized that she had obviously not gone through this process correctly and that her visa was going to be refused. And at that point, government fees are non-refundable, and
yeah.
everything you've put into the process up to that point is not refundable. And yeah, no, obviously it's quite a financial hit, and time. It obviously takes a lot of time, and a lot of time was wasted there.
Yeah, so I guess it's an important concept to note that at the expression of interest stage, it's simply you submitting a little bit of data into a form. It doesn't cost anything. There's no fees charged. You don't upload any documents. at that stage, the department has not asked to look at any of your documents. They've simply asked you to answer a bunch of questions to tell them what your profile is. And I say to people, it's kind of like buying a lottery ticket or putting your hat in the ring. It doesn't mean that you're going to be invited. It's not making an application of any type. You're basically putting your data into a big database with a lot of other people. It's a competitive database of people who are looking to be invited. And if you are invited, then you need to back up everything you said in your expression of interest.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right, this is a
So
busy slide.
it's a busy slide. Sorry, I know there's a lot of information here. I love data. Data is key. So I thought it was important to outline what the quotas were for the 2025-2026 financial year. So the department will set their annual quota or their visa places for the financial year ahead. So in this case, there's 185,000 places. They will allocate that, as you can see in the table below, between skilled visas, employer-sponsored visas, partners, parents. It's quite a large program, and obviously, if you've been on the Department of Home Affairs' visa page, you've seen the list. There are many, many visas that can be applied for, and they've all got a place in the program. Now, what I wanted to highlight was that subclass 189, 190, 491, so essentially the GSM program, makes up a relatively small portion of this 185,000 places. If you have a look at the first highlighted yellow line for the skilled independent visa, you'll see that for this financial year, they've got a placement of 16,900 visas, which makes up 9.1% of the entire program. So a very, very small percentage of visas. Might sound like a big number, but when you take into consideration everybody already in that expression of interest database, how many people worldwide are continually, putting new expressions of interest in, you can imagine it is quite competitive. And also worth noting, if you look at previous years, we were on about 32,000, 30,000, and it's been almost halved down to 16,900 now. It's not a program that the department are clearly prioritizing. But if we do look down to 190 and 491, so state territory nominated, you'll see it's been pretty consistent, 31,000, 30,000, and this year 33,000. So a big push for those state nominated and regional programs to try and drive skills into those regional areas. And that makes up 17.8% of the program for this financial year. So obviously, statistically there, you're more likely to be invited for a 190 and 491 over a 189. Sam, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so skilled independent in recent times has been reserved by the government for really highly in demand occupations that they want to throw at those industries, and we're talking nurses and construction workers and occupations and industries in Australia which are crying out for skilled labour. Um, Historically, going back, I've been doing this for 20 years. There was a point in time that if you scored 65 points as an accountant, you were guaranteed to get an invite under 189, and those days are well and truly gone. 189 is like if you called me today and said I'm an accountant, I've got 65 points. What's my chances of getting an invitation in 189? I'd say forget it. It is not going to happen. 65 points as an accountant, like go and seek state sponsorship, but skilled independent, forget it. But historically, that's the way it was. But now they're using the skilled independent to look after certain industries. Construction and healthcare is basically it. It's interesting too, and we'll talk about this later in the webinar. The employer sponsored on the top line, you can see that's increased over time, and it's a component of the migration planning levels that the government, I think, can't get away from, and that is that employer sponsorship drives a big part of the economy and the skill level requirements here in Australia. But we'll get onto that a little bit later.
Absolutely. Next, I'm going to touch on the state nomination programs a little bit. So this year, majority of states have received an interim allocation. So you heard Sam speak earlier on in the webinar about how the government will hand down allocations to each state, and the states then go away and essentially decide how they want to use that allocation. So at the moment, the government has handed down a small interim allocation for some states. For example, if we looked at Australian Capital Territory, they've only been given 165 places. So very, very limited number there. Just as an interim allocation, the full allocation should hopefully be released in the coming months, and then we'll see if there's been any changes. But today, I'm just going to speak about a snapshot of what it looks like at the moment. So um, Australian Capital Territory, or ACT, is focusing their program on healthcare, education, IT, engineering, and construction. Those are the key sectors. In reality, if you're not in any of those sectors, it is highly unlikely that you would be selected by them and nominated by them. So just worth noting that you would want to obviously be in one of those areas.
What I like about the
Um,
ACT nomination process is it's really quite transparent. They give you a lot of detail on who you need to be and what you need to do in order to achieve an invitation. They have a points matrix within the point system for their own nomination program. And it's easier to interpret than some other states and territories. And I think they're more transparent in the data they release and the information they
yeah,
give about the program itself as compared to New South Wales.
yeah. No, absolutely. They yeah, they drill down. So ACT drills down and they'll say literally that they will use 5 places on a construction project manager, just using that as an example. So you'll know that in this whole financial year, they're only willing to invite 5. So it really, that you Sam's right, they are quite transparent. New South Wales is, as you can see, it's home to the largest share of migrants in Australia. It is an incredibly populous state. It is very competitive. Everybody wants to go to New South Wales. They have quite a large skills list of occupations that they are open to nominating, but in reality, the sectors that we've listed there are their major focus and where their allocations are going to go. So again, if you're not in one of those major sectors, your occupation doesn't fall within one of those major sectors, you need to be open to potentially other states that have, a wider interest really.
And just from a logistical point of view, it's perhaps interesting for people to understand that the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory that we talked about first off, probably has a demand issue. There's not enough people who want to go to the ACT, whereas New South Wales has the opposite problem. It's got too many people who want to come and live in New South Wales, and therefore it doesn't need to be as transparent, and it doesn't need to be as inviting to apply, and it
Yeah,
doesn't need to make it as easy. And this is where all the states and territories differ, and all the states and territories are vying for different skills, but based on a supply and demand issue. The photo that you're looking at there is the Opera House and Sydney Harbour. And Sydney is a very beautiful city, and people are drawn to it, and people want to live there. And we could pros and cons Sydney compared to Melbourne, compared to Brisbane, compared to Adelaide, and on and on and on. But at the end of the day, there's a huge demand of people who want to go to Sydney, who want to go to New South Wales. It's the fact that is the supply is very short. They don't have a lot of nominations to hand out, so therefore they don't need to make it easier as compared to the ACT. Hope that made sense.
yeah. No, absolutely. They actually say on their state nomination website that they strongly encourage you to consider other state options because they know just how few people receive an invitation. Don't put all your eggs in that basket because you might be quite disappointed.
Yeah.
Northern Territory. So they also haven't, none of the states have received their full allocation. So they also have a small interim quota. Because it's so small, they've decided that they will only be using that on onshore applicants at this time. If I look at the program historically, yes, they were always historically open to quite a relatively wide variety of occupations. Some occupations they also wanted to see that you had a potential job offer in Northern Territory. It really just depends. I'm interested to see what the program will do once they fully reopen with the full with their full quota for the year, and we'll see what they do. If obviously once they've reopened, they could make any changes that they like. I think they'll probably keep it the same as last year, Sam.
Yeah. And it's also, I guess, important to understand that it's the federal government who are handing out the nominations to the state and territories. They normally do that at the start of the migration year, which coincides with the start of the financial year, which is the 1st of July. But here we are almost at the 1st of November, and the federal government still hasn't handed out the full allocation. They haven't told
Yeah.
us why, but they're holding back parts of the allocation to the states and territories. We have been told that it's imminent and it's about to happen, and that the states and territories are going to get their allocation soon. But here we are, we're waiting.
Yeah, depends on what soon means. Days, weeks, hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully soon. So we'll just wrap up on the last couple of states. So Queensland, just their major focus is building and construction, healthcare, education, and IT. Very much the same as New South Wales and in ACT actually as well. Also, quite a competitive state. Historically, we've seen invitations trickle through from Queensland, but they are also quite a popular and competitive state. So worth noting. South Australia, I would say, is probably less competitive. They have quite a broad list of occupations that they are open to. They have expressed that their current program will focus on construction trade occupations. That's where majority of their allocations will probably be going. But that doesn't mean you don't have a chance in other occupations. We've definitely seen some invitations come through for South Australia over the last financial year that weren't necessarily just in construction trades.
Yeah, and that's what I'd say about South Australia also is that it's less competitive compared to Queensland, for example, compared to New South Wales, for example. But it's also quite transparent, so it's similar to the ACT in its transparency of process, and not as competitive as some of the other states. So. But it's a
Mm.
beautiful place. South Australia is a lovely place. It's got beaches, it's got wineries, it's got all sorts of things. So I'd encourage people to look at South Australia if you haven't before. The
Mm.
housing's cheaper than it is in other parts of Australia. It's less densely populated than other parts of Australia. I'm a big protagonist for South Australia.
Can tell. So I'm interested to get your feedback here, actually, Sam, on Tasmania. I mean, I would have thought that they were also not as competitive, but I've always found their state nomination program to be so competitive.
Mm,
They change it year on year. They introduce multiple streams. Currently,
yeah,
they've got about
it's
6
confusing.
different streams running.
Yeah, yeah,
Very complex to interpret. You could spend
yeah,
hours on their site trying to dissect it.
yeah,
We have. And at
yeah,
the moment, in a nutshell, if you're offshore, if you want nomination from Tasmania, you need to have a job offer in health, allied health, or education. Otherwise, they're not going to
y-
select you. If we really strip it back, that's what it is.
yeah. Yeah, Tasmania's been like that for quite a while now. It's complex, it's difficult, and if you're not onshore living in Tasmania, then forget it. And and the reason that the states and territories do this, the states and territories gear their invitations towards people who are already living and working in their state or territory. Excuse me, because they're vying for what they call to be a good migrant, someone who's going to continue to live and work in their states and territory. Um, so for that reason, they put more weight and emphasis behind a person who is already living in the state or territory. And for some of the states and territories, they can perhaps use up their full allocation from those people. They see those people as good migrants because they will continue to live and work in their state and territory. The worst thing that a state or territory could do is to give you a nomination and you get a visa and then you go and live and work in another state or territory, and they would see that as a big fail because they didn't gain the skills that they were looking for, but they gave you one of their precious nominations which they don't have a lot of.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a good point and helps just give some context onto what it means to the states. Yeah. With Victoria, also quite competitive. And interestingly enough, Victoria is actually open to the entire skills list. So medium and long, short, ROL, they're open to it all. If you are in occupation on the skills list, you can put in what's called a registration of interest, which is, think of it as a second EOI almost, directly with the state of Victoria, and then they will pick potential applicants from that pool. Now, last year they did do the same thing. They opened up their program. They said that they were obviously open to all occupations. Anybody could submit a registration of interest for Victoria. And then it was around the middle of November, if I recall correctly, they sent out a communication saying that their focus for the remainder of the program year, which obviously would have been November through to June, would only be focusing on trade occupations, which came as a little bit of a surprise, I guess. You open up your program saying that you're open to everything, and then obviously you strip it down. They still kept their website the same. You could still submit registrations of interest, but invitations largely were going to the trades. So I'm interested to see what they'll do this year when they get their full allocation, if they'll do something similar.
Yeah, I guess it's an easy way for the states to build their program, and that is to say, you know, on a public level, we're open to all the occupations, and then internally they must have their own filters and matrix
Mm,
to determine who gets an invitation and who doesn't. And instead of publicizing that and making it clear from the outset, they just say, okay, well, here's the funnel.
mm,
Everyone fits in the funnel. And then we will, behind the scenes, strip it down to those that we're really interested in.
yeah. Last up, we have Western Australia. So, because the interim allocation is so small, they've just decided to keep their program closed entirely. Western Australia is also it's one of the more populous states. It is very competitive. So, I mean, it's not uncommon for Western Australia to close their program quite early in the financial year. They use up their allocations quite quickly, and so I wouldn't also necessarily put all my eggs in that one basket, just due to the competition.
For sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, some invitation rounds. So, data is obviously very important, and you want to know what are your chances of being selected. Now, the department do publish the invitation rounds for 189. So if you were to go onto the website, you would see that the 189 had 6,887 invitations issued in the month of August. I've just given a snapshot of a couple of occupations and what their point levels were at the time that they were selected. There are, of course, more that make up that 6,000 odd invitation round. The department will disclose obviously the invitations for the 189, but because 190 and 491 state nomination programs are obviously run by the states, selected by the states are the ones that nominate you, and then you get your invitation in that manner. We need to rely on the states to release data on what their invitation rounds are. Now, some states do, most states don't. So it does mean it is very difficult to predict if you will or won't receive an invitation and how many points is enough. So I just think that that's important to note. There's no way to predict or guarantee there'll be an invitation. It is just year on year. It is
It's a
different.
common
It's
question,
yeah,
isn't it, Jamie? People say, "Oh,
always.
I've gone and submitted my EOI, and I'm scoring 75 points in the occupation of X, Y, and Z. How long will it be
Yeah.
before
How
I get an
long
invitation?"
is it
And it's and
enough?
I say to people, well, you may as well have bought a lottery ticket, and you're waiting for how long it's going to be before you win the lottery. I mean, it's not quite that competitive, but it's a similar concept. You've simply put your data into a database and asked for an invitation. There's a very good chance that you won't be invited at all. So prepare yourself for the fact that in 2 years your EOI will expire and you won't have an invitation, and you're back to square one. And you've spent a lot of money. You've done a skills assessment, you've done an English language test, you may have done a number of other things to try and improve your position in order to score enough points to get an invitation. And at the end of the day, it may all be for nothing. So prepare yourself
Mm.
for that reality also.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, a couple of years ago, they were issuing invitation rounds monthly for 189. And because that quote has been slashed, you'll see an invitation round once a year, twice a year, very random, can't predict when it's coming. Yeah, so it
Well, that
is
was a big
incredibly
invitation round there
competitive.
in August,
It
just
was.
recently, wasn't it? Six thousand eight
Yep.
hundred and eighty-seven places out of a program, which is what was it, 16,900?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
that's a fair allocation
Chunk.
in one particular round of invitations.
Yeah. And at the point levels, I mean, just so that you can see there. So if you had an expression of interest in for a 189 and you were a construction project manager with 90 points, then you would have got picked up. If you had 85 points, you wouldn't have gotten picked up in that round. That's
Yeah, but
basically what that means.
you wouldn't necessarily have been picked up. So it's good to note that if you're a construction project manager and you're in the pool of applicants and you've got 90 points, you may not necessarily have been invited, because if there's 10,000 construction project managers in the
Fair
pool
enough.
at 90 points, and we don't know that there is or that there isn't because we don't have transparency to the data, then you could still sit in the pool for quite a long time potentially as a construction project manager with 90 points, and you're scratching your head going, why didn't I get invited? It's simply because it's first in, best dressed. So if people are in front of you with more points than you, then they're going to get an invitation before you're going to get an invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point, Sam.
That's how competitive it is. But those are some good
And
examples of occupations that generally do get picked up. If you work in education, if you work in healthcare, if you work in construction, those are key industries here in Australia that we're crying out for.
absolutely. All right, Sam, you want to run us through some common mistakes to avoid?
Yeah, we see a lot of common mistakes to avoid, but because people do their own applications and then they call us and they're quite distraught because they can see that they've let themselves down. So, common issues. Well, first of all, anything you put in your expression of interest, you're going to have to back it up at a later date with documents. And solid documents. So, claiming work experience without employment references that meet the Department of Home Affairs criteria. And so you used to work for a guy, you're a plumber, and you used to work for a guy like 6 years ago, and you worked for him for like 3 years, but he's now gone out of business. And his accountant doesn't have any of his documents. You don't have any of your pay slips because you never kept them. He can't provide you an employment reference because he doesn't run a business anymore, but you're going to claim those points in your EOI anyway. And that might not be good advice. You might need to trim back your EOI and not claim that period of work experience. Then again, you might be able to get creative and you might be able to go and get tax documents. You might have an old employment contract. You could potentially do a statutory declaration from yourself and from a co-worker. So it depends on the scenario, but be careful in over-claiming for periods of work that you can't back up. Jamie.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And also, I mean, the department expects that, you know the requirements. I mean, no, you're not qualified in this. You haven't necessarily studied this. You don't necessarily know the regulations, but that's not the department's problem. They expect and they put the onus on the applicant when they are putting this information in the expression of interest, that they are aware of what they're claiming for and that they can back that up with evidence. If you make a typo on your English test scores and you get an invitation and you've far overclaimed for your English because of that, you can't go back to them and say, I made a mistake. They're not going to accept that.
Yep, yep. So you need to be accurate in your claims and be able to back it up with documents. Your documents need to be valid at the time of invitation. Okay, and I can't stress enough, it's about the time of invitation. So if you're lucky enough, if you're a person who is lucky enough to receive an invitation, I sincerely hope that all your information in your EOI was accurate at the time of invitation, because you can't go back and change things. So let's say, for example, you get an invitation based on the information that you had in your expression of interest, but it turns out that at the time of invitation, your English language test results were out of date. You can't fix that. You're done. You're finished. There's no coming back. So documents have got to be valid at the time of invitation. Choosing wrong occupations is another one. Choosing occupations that you think aligns to your skills and experience, but is actually different. We use a dictionary called the ANSCO dictionary here in Australia, and encompasses a lot of different occupations. And you need to accurately select an occupation that aligns to your skills, experience, and skills assessment.
Yeah, occupations are called different things around the world just because, I mean, I'll use the example of like an engineer. You're called an engineer in your home country, and that's at that level is considered to be an engineer, but in Australia, it could be considered a technologist or a technician. So you've got to be quite careful about the occupation selection. It has to meet Australia's standards and their definition.
Yeah. Calling yourself a civil engineer when you're actually a civil engineering technician doesn't seem like a big difference, but it's fatal in an application process.
Absolutely. Not updating your
All right.
EOI if things change is also important.
Yep. And
If
look, you can update your EOI to um, give you a better advantage. You may have accrued more work experience, and that's something that you want to inform your EOI of, so that you claim more points. But similarly, there may be other things in your EOI which aren't up to date that you should have updated. You get an invitation; it's not true at the time of invitation. Your application can be refused.
absolutely.
Cool. Do you
Why
want to
use
work
a registered
through the
migration agent?
reason?
What is the, yeah, let's work through that. I mean, everybody always asks, do I have to use an agent? Absolutely do not have to use an agent, but there's clear benefits as to why you should. I think obviously we've outlined the risks involved with not making the correct occupation selections and making sure your documents are valid. And so using a migration agent that's quite hands-on um, will ensure that obviously these little things are checked, are managed throughout the process, so that you don't have to worry about them. So we know I pride. I'm very proud of the fact that we don't take on clients unless we believe that there's a realistic chance you'll be invited. We unfortunately can't guarantee it, but we are quite strict with the clients that we take on. There are a lot of agents out there that will happily charge a fee to take you on when they know there's no chance of you receiving an invitation. That's just not the way that we work.
We have a very heavy screening process to screen out people that we don't believe will qualify, that we don't want to take on clients, that we don't want to waste your money, your time. We don't want to waste our time. It's not in our interest to take on clients who don't qualify. And we will, as Jamie says, we'll screen you out. We will assess you and your information to determine if you have a chance or not.
Absolutely. And I think a big value add is somebody that just takes the burden of the admin as well. So we track the expiry dates of your key documents. We'll get in touch with you before they expire so that you can renew them. We'll help you go through that process. We are constantly monitoring the state nomination programs. You get monthly updates. If new opportunities pop up, we'll let you know. If states close their programs, we'll let you know. So we do definitely keep you in the loop and do our best to project manage this end to end to give you the best possible chance of being selected and invited to apply. Which I think is invaluable when you don't, life gets busy, you don't know when your documents are expiring, you forget that, oh, I stopped work for a 6-month break, I need to update my expression of interest, all those sorts of things. It's important to have somebody who can manage that on the back end for you.
Yeah, and I guess it's also an important concept to understand that if you're wanting to migrate to Australia and you've got to the point of the process where you have been invited to apply for a visa and you're submitting a visa application, at that point you have invested tens of thousands of dollars. It's not a cheap process, right? The application fees alone for the main applicant are $5,000, $3,000 for a spouse, one and a half for children. You've done your skills assessment, you've done your English language test, you've done health, medicals, etc. You've spent tens of thousands of Australian dollars to get to this point. Um, Now, why not? Why not absolutely bomb-proof your application by engaging a migration agent to ensure that it's all accurate, that it's all up to date, that it is going to be approved. We actually provide a no visa, no fee guarantee on all our general skill migration applications. If we take you on and you're invited to apply for a visa and that visa is not granted, then we'd refund you any fees that you paid to us. We want you to be confident in our services that we've brought into this process as much as you have, so that it will be successful at the end of the day. You've invested a lot of time and energy in this process. It needs to be successful at the end of the day. Yeah, that's why you should invest in the
Absolutely.
services of a migration agent, whether it's us or someone else.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
don't do
Just
my
use
own
professional
taxes
advice.
anymore because I made a big mistake on my own taxes once a long time ago, and I'm like, this is not something that I should be messing with. I am not a tax accountant, Sam. Like, concentrate on what you know. And that's exactly the reason why you use a migration agent. Anyway, let's move on. We're 50
Yeah.
minutes in, Jamie.
Oh gosh. Okay. Last slide. I thought it was very important to include. Is what happens if you're not invited? What do I do? Is it all a waste? Do I throw my documents in the bin, Sam? Do I give up? What do I do?
Yeah. Yeah, shame. So at the end of the 2 years from when you submitted your EOI, the EOI immediately expires. Okay. Now you can go and submit another one the next day, and the EOIs don't cost anything. You can have multiple EOIs running at the same time, and you can continually lodge new ones. It's just data in a database. It doesn't cost anyone anything, right? But if you're not getting invitations based on your current situation now, then chances are you're not going to get invitations in the future. So what can you do? We'll stay ready, get your documents, get them ready, keep them ready, because who knows, you might get an invitation. But if you're not getting invitations, then please explore employer sponsorship opportunities. I have a client in South Africa. Actually, he kind of is a client. He kind of isn't a client. He's engaged with another migration agent, and he's got a expression of interest in the system, and he's had multiple expressions of interest in the system. He's a diesel mechanic, and he's got excellent experience as a diesel mechanic, but he's not getting invitation to apply, unfortunately, because he can't score competent English. Okay, he's just below the level of competent English that he needs, and this guy would seriously overnight get an employer sponsored visa here in Australia. Um, and that's what we've suggested that he goes and does. There's other opportunities out there. You need to explore all the opportunities, and employer sponsorship is a really key one. It's a really important one. It opens up other pathways, and yeah, if you're a person who works in an occupation that is in demand in parts of Australia, and again, it's usually the regional areas of Australia who are crying out for diesel mechanics and other occupations which are in high demand, but those regional areas struggle to attract skilled labour, then the chances are that you might be successful in picking up employer sponsored visas. So explore those options. There's key recruiters in the industry who recruit internationally and into the regional areas. And I'm confident this diesel mechanic that I'm talking about will pick up an employer sponsored sometime soon.
Absolutely. Employer sponsored visas are a whole different ball game. So we are doing a webinar next month. So you will get a mailer regarding that, so that you can sign up if you're interested. Even if you can't fit in, your schedule around that time slot, the recording will be sent to you afterwards. So definitely some valuable insight. It's going to be shared there, how they work, some tips on how to get a sponsor. So yes, definitely keep an eye out for that next webinar. It'll be very helpful.
Yeah, tune into the next webinar. And I'll just reiterate where we talked about earlier with the planning levels. If you look at the employer sponsored planning levels, they're going up over the course of time. The government's putting more emphasis and more numbers behind employer sponsored visas as compared to the skilled 189, for example. So clearly the government believes that it's an important part of the migration program, and they're increasing the quotas, or they have done over the course of time through the employer-sponsored program. So it's an important component to consider.
Absolutely. We didn't get any questions in the chat bot today, so we must have been nice and thorough. If anybody's too shy to ask a question, you are welcome to email us. If you're watching this, please email us any questions that you have. Our initial advice is at no charge. Give us a call, pop us an email. We will definitely assist.
Yeah, for sure. Get in touch. We're happy to speak with you, happy to answer some initial questions, have a chat. We don't charge for initial consultations. We do charge for in-depth assessments of individual circumstances, but the first conversation is for free, and we're not going to suggest that we take you to that next level of in-depth investigation if we don't believe you've got some chance of success.
Absolutely. All right.
Right,
Perfect. Well,
Jamie,
thank you,
I
Sam.
think my throat's done.
Shame.
Yeah, I'm about
Thanks for
to lose my
pushing through.
voice. I've
It's
just got
okay.
there. I've eaten half a packet
Oh,
of
God.
throat lozenges, but we got there. So thank you for carrying me.
That's of course no problem at all, Sam. Well, I hope you feel better soon. And yeah, everybody have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.